tensions have now sharply escalated in the Strait of Hormuz after reports that Iranian forces opened fire near vessels, including they fired at an Indian-flagged ship. At least 2 Indian vessels were forced to turn back after firing incident, although no damage or injuries have been reported so far. It is now coming to light that the Strait of Hormuz is once again closed, and reports emerging that Iranian forces opened fire on vessels, including an Indian-flagged ship. The Indian government has taken serious note of the development, with the Ministry of External Affairs summoning the Iranian ambassador to lodge a strong protest. This comes amid rising volatility in the region, where Iran has reimposed restrictions on the crucial shipping route, which is a key artery for global oil trade. The situation remains tense, with diplomatic engagement now underway as India seeks clarity and accountability over the incident involving its vessels. Now, coming to light at this hour, tensions have once again escalated sharply in the Strait of Hormuz after reports emerging that Iranian forces opened fire on vessels near the Strait of Hormuz, including Indian-flagged ships. At least 2 Indian vessels were forced to turn back after the firing incident, although no damage or injuries have been reported so far. The Indian government has taken a serious note of the development. Ministry of External Affairs here in India has summoned Iranian ambassador and lodged a strong protest on the matter. This comes amid rising volatility in the region, where Iran has now once again reimposed restrictions on the crucial shipping route through which 20% of the world's global oil as well as energy passes. The situation as of right now remains tense, with diplomatic engagement underway as India seeks clarity and accountability over the incident involving its own vessels. All right, we'll try and get my colleague Manish Jha. Meanwhile, the latest, of course, emerging on that closure of the Strait of Hormuz, we are given to understand that 2 Indian-flagged vessels have turned back. This after 1 vessel was fired at while passing through the Strait of Hormuz. That's the big story coming to light at this point in time. An Indian-flagged tanker were among the ships targeted as Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz yet again. The tensions are now escalating, marking a global shift in what could be the end to the Middle East conflict. Until a couple of hours ago, Strait of Hormuz was open. As of this evening, the Strait of Hormuz has been closed, and now an Indian-flagged vessel has been targeted. My colleague Manish Jha joining us with more details. Manish, सुनने में आ रहा है कि एक इंडियन शिप को गोली मारी गई, IRGC कमांड नेवल शिप्स ने गन फायरिंग की, जिसकी वजह से 2 वेसल्स वापस चली गई हैं। क्या कुछ बता सकते हैं हमें इस बारे में?
बिल्कुल, देखिए, सबसे बड़ी जानकारी यही है कि जब इंडियन टैंकर वहां से क्रॉस कर रहा था तो IRGC की तरफ से उस पर फायरिंग की गई थी, और इस मामले में भारत सरकार ने भी ईरानियन एम्बेसडर को समन किया है ताकि एक औपचारिक तौर पर विरोध भी जताया जा सके। लेकिन चूंकि इस बात की आशंका पहले से ही जताई जा रही थी कि हॉर्मुज स्ट्रीट से अब जो भी जहाज गुजरेंगे उन जहाजों को लेकर ईरान की तरफ से भी उस पर थ्रेट था कि वहां पर फायरिंग हो सकती है। और आप देखिए, सबसे बड़ी बात यही है कि अमेरिका की अपनी शर्तें थी, IRGC की अपनी शर्तें थी। ऐसा लगता है कि जब ईरानियन वाटर के पास से होकर इंडियन टैंकर गुजर रहे होंगे तो उस वक्त किसी कंफ्यूजन की वजह से भी हो सकता है कि IRGC की तरफ से ये फायरिंग की गई हो। और चूंकि जैसा कि हम लोग देख रहे हैं कि वहां पर सिचुएशन बहुत ही टेंस बनी हुई है, आज खास करके जब एक बार ईरान की तरफ से कहा गया कि हमने हॉर्मुज स्ट्रीट को खोल दिया है, तो ऐसा लग रहा है कि हो सकता है कि जहाज उस समय क्रॉस करने की कोशिश कर रहा हो, जब उन्हें लगा कि यहाँ हरी झंडी मिल चुकी है, हॉर्मुज स्ट्रीट में आप क्रॉस कर रहे हैं, और फिर अचानक ही ईरान की तरफ से कहा गया कि हम हॉर्मुज स्ट्रीट को बंद कर रहे हैं क्योंकि अमेरिका अपने रुख से पीछे हटने को तैयार नहीं है। तो ये जो एक किस्म का कंफ्यूजन चल रहा है अमेरिका और ईरान के बीच हॉर्मुज स्ट्रीट को लेकर, उसका असर यहाँ साफ तौर पर दिखने में पड़ा है। और उसमें जिस टैंकर पर अटैक हुआ उसमें से दुर्भाग्यवश एक टैंकर इंडियन टैंकर भी है। तो अभी पहले ये कंक्लूजन निकालना कि क्या वो इंडियन टैंकर को निशाना बना, उससे ज्यादा प्रतीत ऐसा होता है कि ऑन ग्राउंड यानी कि समंदर में जब हॉर्मुज स्ट्रीट को जब वो दो टैंकर क्रॉस कर रहे हैं तो आईआरजीसी ने कोशिश की कि उन दोनों टैंकर को नहीं जाने दिया जाए और उसमें से एक टैंकर इंडियन टैंकर था।
All right, Manish, बहुत-बहुत धन्यवाद आपका. That's the latest, of course, coming as far as the firing on one of the Indian flagged vessels is concerned. My colleague reporting from Tel Aviv, clarifying that this could be a mistake. We don't know the details of it just as yet, but this is major escalation in the war, and India has now registered strong protest on the matter as well. Joining me on the show is Ambassador Mahesh Sachdev, former Indian diplomat. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for taking time out. You're hearing of those details coming to light, sir. Your first response to the fact that perhaps an Indian flagged vessel was also fired at by IRGC. It could be a mistake, but the fact of the matter is 2 Indian vessels had to go back, had to take a U-turn. Among the vessels that were targeted, one was an Indian vessel.
Yes, it's a serious matter, but it's amenable to various explanations at this stage. We would not know for sure till an authoritative statement by Iranian side is issued. Firstly, it was all of a sudden that Iran made a U-turn. Yesterday, it announced that Strait of Hormuz was free, as long as Israel and Lebanon were having a ceasefire. Today, all of a sudden, it was announced that the strait is closed all over again. And the National Security Council of Iran has lately issued a statement which is quite long, but gives 2 or 3 salient points, which I would like to mention. Firstly, it does link the, the opening of Strait of Hormuz to Lebanese situation, 10-day ceasefire announced yesterday. And there again, we have an issue because Lebanese government has, at the level of the president and prime minister, said that Lebanon is not ready to be surrogate of any other country. And in the statement by the president, he thanked Saudi Arabia and the United States, but did not thank Iran. That's one part which might have prompted closure of Strait of Hormuz. Second part is the statement of the SNCSC says that ships transgressing through Strait of Hormuz may be supplying to the American bases in the Gulf, and therefore the Revolutionary Guards Navy would have to check all vessels, and they would have to collaborate with it. That's the second part. Third part is that since the United States has not lifted its blockade over Iranian ships, it implies, excuse me, it implies that Gulf is either safe for all ports or is not safe for any port.
Absolutely.
So that may be the third part.
Right. I want to, Ambassador, understand.
Allow me one more sentence.
Sure.
It might have something to do with the Pakistani Chief of Defense Staff visit to Iran, which concluded today. Perhaps no common ground was reached, and Iran thought that they would have to stick to their guns, and any concessions would have to be made reciprocally during the negotiations with Americans. No premature concessions to be made. So Hormuz was shut all over again.
Okay.
These are speculative possibilities.
Absolutely. These are speculative at this point, but we're also hearing from Ministry of External Affairs, sir. Stay with us. More news coming in. Ambassador of Iran in New Delhi was called in by the Ministry of External Affairs today for a meeting with the Foreign Secretary this evening. And during that meeting, Foreign Secretary conveyed India's deep concern at the shooting incident earlier today involving 2 Indian flagged ships in the Strait of Hormuz. He noted the importance that India attaches to the safety of merchant shipping and mariners and recalled that Iran had earlier facilitated the safe passage of several ships bound for India. Reiterating his concern at the serious incident of firing on merchant ships, Foreign Secretary urged the ambassador to convey India's views to the authorities in Iran and resume at the earliest the process of facilitating India-bound ships across the strait. The ambassador of Iran undertook to convey these views to Iranian authorities. That's the official statement there coming in from the Ministry of External Affairs. Ambassador, as we try and understand through permutations, combinations of what really went wrong out there, fact of the matter is, if this is new Iran and this is the new Strait of Hormuz, it's more stringent from the blockade we saw earlier.
It is, and we should also factor in the possibility of Tehran not being at one wavelength. The lifting of the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz was announced by the foreign minister, but the Supreme National Security Council, which is run by the IRGC, has issued the statement which I cited subsequent to that announcement. So there might be some kind of inner decision-making flip-flop going on in Tehran, and eventually the hardliners seem to have had their day.
But that's very alarming, sir. What you're essentially suggesting is that perhaps when it comes to foreign policy, Tehran is not intact, its leadership is not intact, and some of its wings could be acting independently. Is that what you're implying? And hardliners could have taken over, IRGC at this point, so perhaps they're not in line with civilian leadership or the regime?
Well, Iran has a very peculiar theocratic republic polity. And there's never any doubt that the theocracy has the upper hand. And following death of the last Rahbar or supreme leader, the current leader's appointment, even though he wasn't Ayatollah and he was son of the late leader, was prompted by IRGC, the Republican Guard, or Pasdaran's intervention, and they have been running the show. So there's no doubt as such that the Republican Guards are in control, but the negotiations managed by Foreign Minister as well as Speaker of the Council, they both are allied with the IRGC. So they might have had better sensitization of what was needed. After all, Iran cannot make enemies of almost every country of the world which consumes crude, and prices have gone through the roof, and so they have to show some kind of flexibility. And this on again, off again business may be the inner dynamic of the Iranian political system. So I'm not saying that the hardliners are only now in control. They've almost always been under control in control in Tehran.
Okay.
But now,
right.
when the deal making with Washington is to be ensured, they are under mounting pressure from United States, from Pakistan and others to make concessions. And
Right.
these concessions cannot be, according to me, cannot be made prematurely. They would have to be made in the second round or later of the negotiations. So
Okay.
that might have prompted them to harden their stuff all over again. Lebanese president's speech not mentioning Iran's role altogether, etc., might even be another signal in that direction. United States is going to host next week a conference of Iran, of Lebanon and Israel. So that may take away the Hezbollah business altogether from Iranian hands,
All right.
and that may be alarmistic.
Absolutely.
Iran.
What does it mean for India, sir? I have to ask you. So far, we know that Iran had made concessions for India. Now, with Indian flagged vessels also coming under attack, what does it mean for India if the choke point is completely blocked by Iran, which means no vessel is allowed to pass through? We're looking at not just a crude shock. We're also looking at an economic shock for India going forward.
It is right. If that happens and the die is cast, I don't think the incident is specific to India. Uh, it may be just incidental that Indian vessels were involved. India is the third largest importer of crude in the world. So Indian ships carrying crude are almost everywhere, and particularly in the Gulf, which is source of nearly half of the crude imported into India. So that those are collateral issues. But in case it turns out that Iranians deliberately attacked Indian ships, then it will be a very serious matter, and it'll harden the Indian position, which has been a bit of neutral in the conflict. So Iran would have to be careful on that score, and why should it not be? It I think a benefit of doubt at this stage would be warranted.
Okay.
Iranians might have been trigger happy. They might be too sensitive, expecting some kind of uh, untoward incident, and the channel of command from Tehran to IRGC Navy in the Strait of Hormuz might be frayed. After all this has happened
Right.
all of a sudden. So
Absolutely.
let's see where it takes.
Yep.
The clarity would descend once fog of war has lifted.
Okay, so we'll of course wait for some clarity, but stay with us. More breaking news coming in. Iran has now issued a strong warning on the Strait of Hormuz. According to Iran's top national security body, Tehran is determined to maintain control over traffic through the Strait of Hormuz until the war is definitively brought to an end and lasting peace is achieved in the region. At the same time, Iran has sharply warned that as long as what it calls the enemy naval blockade continues, it will treat it as a violation of the ceasefire. In such a scenario, Tehran says it will not allow even a limited or conditional reopening of the strait, effectively signaling that full normalization of shipping will remain off the table. In fact, there will not be conditional normalization of shipping as well, which means no vessel will be allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. That is what Iran is saying at the moment. Ambassador, that's a serious warning there as far as Tehran is concerned. So essentially, taking away from what you and I were discussing, it's not just India. No vessel will be allowed to pass through. And if that's the route Iran takes, it's making enemies left, right, and center.
That's true. I have already mentioned to the statement issued by National Security Council of Iran. And this is a bit of a hardline, harking back to the previous position of no ship being allowed to go through Strait of Hormuz. The Omani side being mined or claimed to having been mined, and to and fro ships, both channels are to pass through Iranian territorial waters, as it was implied. I think one should also factor in strong pyrotechnics issued by American president yesterday, 7 statements in one on social media in 1 hour, which were rebutted by the Speaker of the Iranian Assembly, saying they were all false and lies, etc., etc. So that kind of dynamic also is not conducive uh, to negotiations.
Right.
Uh, I think the hardliners who might have been willing to make some concessions, would be accused of losing on the negotiating table whatever the armed forces have won, quote unquote, through the war.
Right.
So no one in Iran's hierarchy would be willing to be accused of that kind of meltdown vis-a-vis Mr. Trump's onslaught and his claim to victory and claim to have decimated X, Y, and Z powers of Iran.
Okay.
So all that leads to reciprocal steps. This may be that kind of situation.
All right. All the threats and all the empty promises Donald Trump has been making to the world, they're being responded to by Iran at this point, calling out his lies. In fact, Iran's suggesting that the multiple lies that U.S. President has doled out in a matter of hours. Now, there is, of course, a possibility of a second round of negotiations just around the corner 2 days from now, hosted perhaps in Islamabad on Monday, but the possibility of that is also far and distant. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for taking time out.